Hello and welcome back. How was your April? It was a really busy one for us, but also there was much to contend with the weather. Although overall April was much the same as it is in most years, we did have some really cold nights, some really wet days, some really windy days, some really nice warm sunshine days. Does kind of sound like April, doesn't it? But in and amongst all of the weather, we did manage to get everything done that we wanted to do. And judging by the comments that come into the comments section on our channel, I have to say, for most of us here in the UK, if you look at Frank or Paula's comments, I always take heart from that and think to myself, well, I think we have a bad day sometimes, but actually it's not so bad, is it? It's not so bad at all. I think Paula mentioned in our last comment that she could possibly see snow in June. I don't think we've seen that since we've been very young, Mrs. W. Anyway, in today's video, we shall be giving you our top tips for the May veg garden. Now, May sees the beginning of what's known as the Hungry Gap. What is the Hungry Gap? Well, the Hungry Gap is a time when all the vegetables and onions and things and everything we had stored down there to overwinter for us to use is gone. We don't have any more potatoes left. We don't have any more of our onions left. They're gone. And all of the new sowings that we put in, you've been watching us doing it through the year, they're yet to come. We won't see anything until June. So those brassicas down there that are doing really well, and we're really pleased with them, it'll be June before we actually do see anything tangible to harvest from those. However, if you succession sowed and planted, you could be harvesting things now. Those of you that are a regular follower of our channel, you'll know that we tried to do this last year, and you can see some of the results here. We have this claret sprouting broccoli, purple sprouting broccoli, it's here, and we are able to eat this at this time, and hopefully that's going to continue cropping now right the way through the month of May. But if you sowed some overwintering cabbages, they'll be coming ready now, and you'll have those to harvest. And of course, for us, what we also tried to do was to grow some veg in our greenhouse and our polytunnel in order that we could get harvest just that little bit earlier. And we won't want this space until later on this month, when we shall be wanting to plant our tomatoes and chilies and peppers. But as you can see, we've been having harvests from here, and we're still getting harvests. We've still got a few more radishes to go, and as you can see, the spring onions are coming along really lovely, and we're getting many harvests from those. For the greenhouse, we're starting to come to the final harvest of the spinach. Looking at them, it's not going to be too long before they want to try to raise a flower and set its seed. And it's probably because of the warmth that's in here now, but we've been enjoying that since January time. And we also have carrots, which are looking really good, and I think we're going to have a nice harvest from those during the month of May.
Looking good.
They are indeed, Mrs. W. Now down on our patio we have that pot of lettuce that you saw a few videos back that Mrs. W had sown back in February, and we're getting lots of picks off those, of that cut and come again lettuce. And of course I know Mandy does this because she often tells me, and good on you, we haven't done any this year, but if you did sow some peas early in the year, around about the beginning of February, you'll be enjoying some lovely pea shoots. And incidentally, the variety that we're growing, Alderman, is very good for using as pea shoots. It's a particularly vigorous plant, and as soon as you cut it, it quickly comes back again. So May month, when growth really starts to accelerate and things really do get going. These have done really well since they've been here in mid-March. We put these in, but now they will really start to go, and yeah, we shall start to see a harvest of these in June. But it's not just the brassicas. Everything that you've put into the ground already, the warmth of May will really start to push those on, and you'll find you'll be needing to be doing jobs like staking your broad beans. They're going to get ever taller, and May can still be a bit of a windy month, so it is a really good idea to stake them now. And of course, don't forget to put some soft things on the top so that you don't poke your eyes out. Now, as you know, we have our own archway that we are going to be growing our peas up, and later on runner beans and French beans. But you don't have the space for this, but you're growing your peas, you've got them in the ground. Now is a good time actually to start getting your stakes in, wigwams in, so those peas can grow up and over those. Now, depending on what variety of strawberry you are growing, you can see ours are in flower now. They're the Cambridge favourite, so they're going to come first. And as they are in flower now, and this is right at the beginning of May, but actually we've been seeing flowers come on these since probably the last week of April. The likelihood is that we shall start to see fruit on these as we approach the end of May. And if you see any runners that start to appear now, do cut those off so that the plant can put all of its energies into those lovely succulent fruit. There's plenty of time for the runners to come if you want to be able to propagate those and make more plants, because they will continue to send those out long after the fruit has been eaten. But for now, just cut those off. Don't let those have a chance to start to root themselves in the ground, otherwise they'll be taking energy from the mother plant. You can probably see on camera here that these carrots are now starting to get their first true leaves, so they're coming along really quite nicely. Now, if you'd sort of sowed them and there are a lot of them too close, you will need to thin those, and this will be the month to do that. But do try to do it in the evenings when the carrot fly that may be about are actually resting and are not on the wing. And also, once you do take any thinnings, remove them straight away up to your compost, or if your compost is near where your carrots are, somewhere much further away from where your carrots are, so that the smell is not there for them to identify where your carrots are. And then keep them covered. Once you've done your thinning, that's it. Cover them up. Don't uncover them again until you suspect they are probably now ready to harvest. Now, May can still be cold. In the main it is warm, but we can still get cold temperatures overnight, so do keep your fleece handy in case you need to cover frost tender plants like your potatoes. These covers happen to be on here because I keep the covers over the onions until we get into May. They'll be coming off very shortly. They should be able to cope with it. We shouldn't have such cold winds. As I said before, May can be windy, but the winds are normally warmer now at this time of the year. But if they did turn cold again, have the fleece ready to put over them to keep those horrible cold winds off. Now, as we do start to see warmer temperatures with your greenhouse, make sure the doors are open and the vents are open on really warm, sunny days. It's amazing how hot the greenhouse soon gets. But during May, we're probably still not at the point where we're getting really nice warm overnight temperatures. They can still dip below and into single figures. If that is the case, don't forget to close the door and the vents up at night so that they don't suddenly then get cold. Now, right at the top of the video, you saw me starting to spread some of our compost, and that's because a harvest has been taken there. Final harvest has gone, plants are out, and I now need to feed that soil, being No Dig. And you will need to do that for every plant that you take a final harvest from, but where you haven't yet put your compost down. So when those purple sprouting broccoli are finished, that we saw a bit earlier, and they're twisted out of the ground, there's been no compost go in there yet for the current growing season, so that then needs to have a nice 1-inch layer put over it. Of course, if you're not No Dig and you garden traditionally, you just need to prep your soil in the way that you normally would. Now, we talked about the brassicas over there that we put in. Growth is really rapid. It really starts to accelerate during the month of May. And when we got to plot 5, you'll see that those brassicas that we put in there and the pak choi, they're really motoring ahead. They really are. However, it's not just your plants. Weeds too love this weather. Warm and wet. And they really start to grow. So do keep on top of them. We're not completely immune to them, but do pull them and don't let them establish. If you don't get on top of them now, before long they will start to take over your plot, and you will then start to struggle to find the motivation to keep on top of those weeds. And when you get to that point, that's when they will put lots of seed all over your plot, and you'll end up with many more weeds. And I know it's something I go on about quite a bit, but I am quite passionate about it. A lot of you, going back to comments, you're always saying how lovely the garden looks, how our veg plots look really great. It is because when we see them, we pull them. Whether it's myself or Mrs. W, if we're walking along, we see something, you pull that weed out, don't leave it in there. And once you get to that point, believe you me, we've been at a point where we've been overwhelmed with weeds in the garden before we were No Dig. So we know exactly how it feels when you come out there and you're just faced with so much weeding to do before you can even do the nice things like harvesting, sowing or planting. You only see our garden like this today, A, because we're No Dig, but secondly, No Dig enables us to keep on top of the weeds. And it's a 5-10 minute job around here just to pick out the few weeds that I see. By doing that, you don't let them establish. You pick them while they're small, because if they get too big and can get their flowers on them, they're just going to be throwing seed all over your plots. Now, what can we be sowing during the month of May? May is that lovely time of year when you could be sowing things outside or inside. Now, for myself and Mrs. W, other than carrots and parsnip, everything is always sown inside so that we can raise them to a stage where we know they're going to be strong enough to put out there. They're not going to be so vulnerable to pests. This month is the month that we should be sowing our Brussels sprouts. Also cabbages for autumn and sweet corn. That can be sown during May. We actually find here that if we sow ours right on the cusp of May, so right toward the end of April, then that works best for us. But May is a good time to sow your sweet corn. The weather is warmer, it soon germinates, and it can be out in your plot by the time you get to the end of May. Also in May, I shall be doing my second sowing of celery. And also we should continue to sow spring onions so that the continuity remains there for us. And then, not before mid-month, but any time from mid-May is a really good time to be sowing your runner beans and your French beans. Bearing in mind just how topsy-turvy the weather has been this year, just as soon as we think we're going to have a nice dry spell, we suddenly get one of those cold spells. So as French beans and runner beans really don't look like that kind of weather. Equally, if we get a really wet month, not so much frosty, but a wet but cold month where the winds are still cold, they don't like that either. So, do yourselves a favour, sow those not before mid-month, but any time from mid-month onwards. Indeed, this year, because we had a bit of trouble with germination with our peas, they're not going to harvest at their usual time. It's probably their final harvest will be right toward the end of June, maybe even going into the beginning of July. So we probably won't be sowing our runners and French beans until getting on towards the end. No, probably actually mid-June. If I really do think it's going to be end of June before those harvests are finished for the peas, it will be mid-June. They only need to be in the pots for a couple of weeks. They soon get big plants like this. And believe you me, if the weather is not so good and you've sown them much earlier, you will be potting them on and potting them on and potting them on. They will fill every pot you put them in every single week. Also, what we also like to do is to succession sow our radish. So we'll sow a few more radish during the month of May, but also the lettuce. Because the lettuce that Mrs. W sowed back in February is not going to last forever. And it's still just a little while before the ones that we've planted out will be ready for us to have. So we shall keep succession sowing the lettuce so that we always have fresh leaves to eat. Now during May, the emphasis actually does switch from sowing seeds to planting out. It's the first time in the year that we find there's much more to plant out than there is to sow. So for instance, in this greenhouse and into the polytunnel, we should be putting our aubergines, our tomatoes, our cucumbers, our peppers and our chilies. They'll all be going into this space during the month of May. And we should keep an eye on the temperatures, and once we can see that those temperatures are stable and not dipping down to really, really cold overnight temperatures, that's the moment when we shall put those plants into this greenhouse. Now, so long as all danger of frost has passed, getting toward the end of the month, you can be planting outside your squash. Our celery will go out, the courgettes, and of course, that all-important grow-along plant that we're doing this year, celeriac. All of those plants are frost sensitive. So do make sure that you're over your frosts and that you're not likely to get a frost anymore. You're better to plant them out in June than to plant them out too early in May when the frost will absolutely kill them dead. They really don't like the frosts. So do be sure that you will no longer get any more frost before putting those plants out. You can see here in plot 5 just how much growth these brassicas and the pak choy are putting on. Pak choy, we're already picking leaves. We're eating that with our stir fries now. Now harvesting. Although it's known as the hungry gap, of course, if you planned like we did, you will still have things to harvest. But also if you have some of those plants that are staples in the garden, you'll have things to harvest. So for your desserts, you've got rhubarb. You can see rhubarb is ready and is good to pick this month. As I said earlier, the salad leaves that Mrs. W actually started off back in February. We're harvesting those now, and we will continue to harvest those through the month of May. Also, while we're waiting for the beetroots to swell, and they won't be of an eatable size until June, but during this month of May, we also mix in beetroot leaves. They're really lovely. Because we've had these covered now and they've managed to recover, they're a nice quality leaf to be able to eat, and not a bird-pecked one.
And they're really young and tender as well, aren't they?
They most certainly are.
Stage, yeah. Go nicely in a salad.
We also have radishes available. If you've got radishes in your garden, they'll be available to harvest during May. And if you remember, we have some in the greenhouse, and we've been eating those through April because they were that bit further forward being undercover. But now these ones outdoor are now ready for us to harvest, and we'll be able to enjoy those during the month of May. Also, if you overwintered your cabbages, they will be available to you during the month of May. And as you saw earlier, we've got things like purple sprouting broccoli, in particular the variety Claret that we have there. That's available for us to harvest during the month of May. And as you saw in the greenhouse, we also have the spring onions that are available to harvest. Now, we have our asparagus bed that we have outside in the front garden, and it's sent up some asparagus, but unfortunately we can't eat it yet. We only sowed the seed last year, so it's still another couple of years before we'll be able to harvest anything from that. But if your asparagus is now established, you'll also have some lovely asparagus to enjoy during the month of May. Now, I can see already that everything is really starting to get a shift on, and those warmer temperatures that we will experience through May will only hasten that. So there's much to look forward to, but still bits and pieces to harvest. Now, do let us know in the comments down below what you have in the ground. What's the state of play for your May? Have you noticed just how quickly the things have actually pushed on? And of course, if you've got different plants to be planting out, then do drop those into the comments, because other people can then read them and they may want to grow them. Which reminds me, Paula, you asked about the Chinese brassicas. The only thing that we actually do grow in our garden at the moment is actually the pak choy or the bok choy. But do send us a message in the comments and let us know some of the things that maybe you've tried and the different things, and we'll see if we can have a go at growing those too in this climate we have here in Norfolk in the UK. We shall see you next time.